Matthew Jenkins had only ever spoken to her in passing, and always with the kind of polite detachment that janitors are trained to carry like armor in places like this. A 73-room mansion, white columns and bay windows, a garden that stretched like a memory no one wanted to revisit. It was the kind of estate where time felt folded, like if you stayed too long you'd see ghosts walking between hedges. Rich folks don't often speak to men like Matthew. Not really. Not like this. Not like what I saw. You think you're just watching a story, but you're not. You're opening something. Something sealed. Something she tried to bury. Her name was Evelyn Crane, widow of the late steel magnate Franklin Crane, the kind of name etched in stone above libraries and courthouse entrances. She wore sorrow like silk, always perfectly draped, always concealing something underneath. No one knew what she did in that house all day. No one asked, because in this town silence is a currency, and the wealthy are the ones printing it. But then, one Thursday morning, gray sky, soft rain tapping the glass like fingernails, Evelyn did something that unstitched the quiet fabric of everything. She left a handwritten note in the broom closet. No signature, no formal request. Just 5 words. Come to the solarium, alone. Folded once, left exactly where Matthew's calloused hands would find it. And I swear when he unfolded it, I felt something shift. Not in the air, not in the light, in reality. As if something beneath the surface had taken notice. Now you need to understand. This wasn't some kindness, this wasn't pity. Evelyn Crane didn't even look people like Matthew in the eye, let alone invite them into the solarium. That glass room where the sun never seemed to shine even on the brightest days. But Matthew went. He didn't tell anyone. Just clocked out early and walked through the side entrance, the one meant for the help, the one the family always kept locked even though no one used it anymore. I was outside that day. I saw him go. Druas and I waited. 5 minutes, 10, an hour. But he never came back out. The cameras, those antique security systems they installed in the 90s, glitched at exactly 3:33 p.m. Just a flicker. 1 second of static. But when it cleared, the door was closed and Matthew was gone. Evelyn didn't mention a word about it to the staff. No search party, no concern. The police weren't called. And when her attorney showed up 3 days later, Evelyn's voice didn't tremble. She simply said, "Mr. Jenkins has left us, he needed to go." No one questioned her, not really. Not until that night, when her baby grandson, barely learning to speak, looked straight at the nanny and whispered, "Matthew's cold." No one had told him Matthew's name. No one had even noticed the janitor was missing. But the child knew. And when the nanny, bless her trembling hands, asked where Matthew was, the boy pointed at the fireplace, then cried. Not screamed. Cried. Like something had been taken from him. They brushed it off like people do with things that don't make sense. Called it imagination, a fluke. Kids hear things. That's what they said. But Evelyn started locking the solarium, from the outside, with 3 deadbolts. And every night since, she's been sleeping in the servants' quarters. No explanation. No word. Just her shadow pacing in a room meant for those she used to ignore. You think you're just a viewer. You think this is entertainment. But there's something you need to understand before this goes any further. Something buried beneath wallpaper and memories and whispered names that were never meant to be heard again. 'Cause last night someone else disappeared. And this time it wasn't someone on the payroll. It was Evelyn's son. He left a voicemail at 2:12 a.m. No words, just one long breath. And then, a voice. One I've heard before but couldn't. Possibly have. A voice that's been missing for 6 days. That voice said, "Don't let her lock the door again." And then the line went dead. Now ask yourself, what does a rich widow want with a janitor she's never spoken to? Why invite him in only for him to vanish? And why, after all this time, does the house still smell like bleach and smoke? You think you've just stumbled on a story, but you've just opened a door that was sealed for a reason. When that voicemail ended, the world seemed to tilt just a fraction, enough to make everything familiar feel suddenly foreign, as if the edges of your reality were fraying, dissolving into static you can't quite tune out. Evelyn's son Marcus, the last person anyone thought would get involved, was now missing too. But here's where it gets complicated, where the story folds in on itself and the ground beneath us turns uncertain. Because the recordings, those secret audio clips that had been found on an old phone buried deep in the mansion's drawer, began to crack with interference, fragments of voices that didn't belong, whispers in languages no one understood, and laughter that froze the blood in your veins. One minute you think you're hearing a simple message, the next you're plunged into a cacophony of distorted sounds that claw at your sanity, and the files themselves kept disappearing, as if the mansion, or whatever holds it, was rewriting history in real time. You start to wonder if Matthew Jenkins had ever really been there, if Evelyn Crane was a widow at all, or a ghost conjured by collective trauma and unspoken guilt. I met Olivia, the lawyer assigned to handle the estate. She's polished, meticulous, but behind her calm exterior lurks a kind of desperate anxiety. She laughs when I bring up the vanished janitor, brushing it off as a clerical error, a misunderstanding born of stress. Yet her eyes dart toward shadows when she thinks no one is watching, and her phone is filled with deleted messages she refuses to explain. Olivia's a puzzle wrapped in a lie, and every word she says feels like a trapdoor opening beneath your feet. Memory plays tricks here. People close to the mansion begin to lose chunks of time, entire days slipping through their minds like water through a cracked vase. One moment they're sure of the truth, the next they're not sure if they even remember their own names. There are rumors now, quiet whispers about experiments, about psychological manipulation, about something buried in the house's foundations that no one dared excavate. Real unsolved mystery, they call it in forums where strangers share, fragmented stories and broken evidence. But the truth behind what no one tells you is far darker. It's not just a story of disappearance. It's a distortion of reality itself, a creeping madness that seeps into the soul like poison. And the mansion seems alive, in its own way. Lights flicker with no cause. Doors creak open when no one's there. A soft murmur rides the edges of every silence, voices that sound eerily familiar, repeating phrases you're sure you've never heard but somehow recognize. Sometimes you think you see figures moving just out of the corner of your eye, only to find empty hallways when you turn. Fear builds not from what's seen but from what's missing. Names forgotten, faces erased, stories left untold. I tried to pin down the timeline to anchor myself with facts. But even the police reports conflict. Some say Marcus was last, seen boarding a plane. Others place him in town days after his supposed disappearance. And Evelyn? She no longer answers calls. No one has seen her leave the mansion since the second night Matthew vanished. It's as if the house swallowed her whole, or maybe she's been hiding all along, trapped by secrets she can't bear to face. The line between mental breakdown and supernatural interference isn't just blurred, it's shattered. And as I sit here, piecing together fragments, I can't help but wonder if the real horror isn't what happened to Matthew or Marcus, but the terrifying possibility that none of this is real in the way we think it is. What if the whole thing is a puzzle meant to unravel your mind? A labyrinth where every door leads to a dead end, every memory a ghost that haunts the spaces between truth and fiction. This isn't just a story anymore. It's a descent into what they don't want you to remember. And with every breath, the question grows louder. What happens when the person you trust most is the one who's rewriting the past? For a moment, it all felt like it might make sense. Like the jagged pieces of this impossible puzzle were finally clicking together in a way that could be understood. I found an old diary buried beneath loose floorboards in the library, a worn leather-bound book whose pages smelled of dust and forgotten summers. The handwriting was shaky but urgent, signed by a woman named Clara Crane, Evelyn's great-aunt. The entries described a tragedy eerily similar to the one unfolding now. A disappearance, a whispered name in the night, a locked room no one dared enter. Clara wrote about the town turning its back, about secrets that clawed under skin like fever. Reading those words, I thought I was finally holding the key, uncovering a hidden truth that had been swallowed by generations. Maybe Matthew's vanishing wasn't random at all. Maybe it was the cruel echo of something buried in the Crane bloodline, something that had been waiting to resurface. I told myself I was close, so close, but then I found it. A detail so small, so easily missed, that I almost thought my mind was playing tricks on me. On the last page, dated exactly 100 years ago, Clara wrote about a visitor who never left, a shadow that didn't belong, a presence that seemed to watch and wait. She described it as something not quite there, a force woven into the mansion's very walls, always watching, always hungry. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a metaphor, an old woman's superstition. The unease that washed over me was unmistakable. It was like uncovering a memory you never knew you had, a memory just out of reach but somehow achingly familiar. There was a glitch in my mind, a crack in the facade of what I thought was reality. And suddenly, the diary wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a mirror reflecting something alive, something waiting beneath the surface of the present. The atmosphere shifted, heavy and cold, as if that invisible watcher Clara feared was still there, still lurking, its gaze peeling away layers of my own certainty. And then the phone rang. The ringtone was the same eerie chime that had played in the mansion the night Matthew disappeared. When I answered, there was only silence on the other end, but behind that silence I heard a faint breath, long and steady, and the unmistakable whisper of a name I hadn't heard before. Not Matthew. Not Marcus, a name that clawed at the edges of my consciousness, dragging a forgotten fear back into the light. I replayed the voicemail over and over, searching for clarity, for a sign that I was losing my mind. But the recording was fractured, like a corrupted file, bits missing, sounds layered beneath other sounds. It was as if someone or something was erasing parts of the story even as I uncovered them. The deeper I dug, the more the line between memory and nightmare blurred until I wasn't sure which was which. I realized then, with a sinking dread, that the danger had been here from the very beginning. Not a person, not a place, but a presence, so intimately tied to the mind that it could rewrite what we believed to be real, unravel who we thought we were. This wasn't just a mystery to solve. It was a trap laid for anyone who dared look too closely, a puzzle designed to consume your sanity. And now, as I sit with this knowledge pressing down like a suffocating weight, I see it. The twisted truth hiding in plain sight. The story we thought we were following, the clues we thought we understood, all point back to a lie so fundamental it demands a complete rewind. Every moment, every detail, every shadow cast on these walls must be questioned. Because the one thing certain is this: you're not crazy, they lied to you. And as the static on the phone line crackled one last time, I realized the story wasn't just about what happened to Matthew or Evelyn or Marcus. It was about what I had forgotten, what we all had forgotten, and the terrible price of remembering. You have to watch again. You have to see it all from the beginning. Because nothing is what it seems, nothing is safe. And the watcher? It's already waiting for you. Beneath the surface of this unraveling story, I am no longer alone in my descent. There are others, people scattered across cities, living quiet, ordinary lives, who have felt the same creeping dread, who have seen the same fractured fragments in their dreams and their waking hours. We are bound by invisible threads, connected by cryptic messages that arrive like ghostly whispers through the static of our devices, through symbols etched in margins of forgotten notebooks, through shared visions that pierce the veil between sleep and waking, dragging us all deeper into this tangled web we cannot escape. You might have caught them too, those symbols flickering in the background of videos, the strange numbers that appear in places they shouldn't, the sudden feeling that you are being watched, that your thoughts are not entirely your own. This is not a coincidence. You were right all along to feel uneasy, to question what you remember and what you think you know. I began to piece together these scattered fragments from online forums, from whispered conversations in dimly lit rooms, from late-night emails sent by strangers who vanished just as suddenly as they appeared. They shared found footage from 20 years ago, grainy recordings no one had ever publicly released, images of places and people tied to the mansion, tied to the whispers, to the disappearances. The footage was raw, unfiltered, unsettling, too real to dismiss as fabrication, too bizarre to accept without question. Faces half hidden in shadows, voices speaking in riddles, eyes that seemed to follow you beyond the screen. What the government never released, they said. Files erased from archives, reports buried beneath layers of silence. And here we are, uncovering them in secret, as if invited into a conversation meant to stay hidden forever. The messages grew more urgent, more cryptic, often appearing in places only certain eyes could see, embedded in songs on obscure radio stations, encoded in artwork in public spaces, carved into the bark of trees along forgotten trails. Each symbol a key, each message a lock, and between them a language of memory and identity fractured by forces beyond comprehension. It is as if a larger force is orchestrating this dance from behind the curtain, manipulating what we remember, who we trust, even who we are. Control is not just external but internal, a slow poisoning of the mind that leaves us questioning if our thoughts are truly our own, or echoes planted by something watching from the shadows. Into this labyrinth steps another voice, a third perspective that feels different, almost disembodied yet intimately present. An observer who claims to have seen it all from the beginning, who warns that the story we chase is only a fragment of a much larger nightmare. This voice is cautious, hesitant, weighed down by knowledge that isolates it from everyone else, yet reaches out nonetheless, trying to break through the walls of confusion and denial. It tells us to beware of certainty, to doubt even the memories that feel most real, because the line between the self and the watcher is thinner than we imagine. This observer is both guide and prisoner, trapped in a place where identity slips, like sand through grasping fingers, where memory fractures like broken glass, and where the truth is a dangerous flame threatening to consume anyone who dares to approach. We are all participants now, not just witnesses, in a story that refuses to be told clearly, that hides its true face behind layers of deception and silence. Each revelation only deepens the mystery. Each answer spawns new questions. The house, the vanished, the whispered. Names, they are pieces of a greater design, a shadow play where reality bends and twists beneath the weight of unseen hands. And as the threads tighten, it becomes impossible to tell where the story ends and where we begin. So here we stand, on the edge of something vast and unknowable, surrounded by fragments of memory that may not belong to us, messages meant to be, decoded by eyes willing to see beyond the veil, and a presence watching us all, patient and unyielding. The fear is no longer just for the missing or the lost. It is for ourselves, for the fragile sense of identity we clutch desperately as the world shifts beneath us. This is no ordinary mystery. This is a riddle wrapped in silence and shadow, a test of who we are when all that seemed certain dissolves into doubt. And as you watch this unfold, as you feel the weight of the unknown pressing in, remember this: you have been part of this story all along, and the ending has yet to be written. The yike moment came with a silence so heavy it felt as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something irreversible to unfold. Standing alone in the dim light of the mansion's solarium, I wasn't searching for answers anymore. Not the what, but the why. Why had all this darkness crept into the edges of our lives, threading itself through memories, weaving lies into the fabric of our reality? The mystery was no longer a puzzle to solve, but a mirror reflecting something raw and fragile about what it means to be human. The desperate need to hold on to identity, to grasp at truth when all around us is shifting like sand. I could feel it pressing down inside me, a truth so profound and terrifying that it threatened to shatter the very core of who I was. What if the real danger wasn't the shadows lurking in the mansion, or the unseen watcher whispering names in the night, but the fear of knowing ourselves too deeply? The fear of facing the parts of ourselves buried beneath years of denial and silence. I realized then that this story was a reckoning, not with ghosts or conspiracies, but with the human soul itself. A confession spilled from me, unbidden and raw, the moments I had tried to forget, the cracks in my own memory that I had blamed on exhaustion or stress were pieces of this greater fracture. I had been part of this mystery all along, not just a witness but a participant in a cycle of pain and forgetting. The mansion, the vanished janitor, the symbols, were they warnings or manifestations of my own fractured self? And in that vulnerable moment, the choice became clear: to let this truth destroy me, to dissolve into the confusion and fear, or to hold it gently, to accept the darkness as part of what makes me human, and find a fragile salvation in that acceptance. The line between nightmare and awakening blurred until I could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. It was like waking from a dream I hadn't realized I was living. A dream woven from fear, loss, and secrets too heavy to carry alone. And in that awakening was both a terrifying abyss and a strange kind of hope, a chance to step beyond the shadows and into something undefined, something real. The mystery remains, not solved but transformed, a living question echoing in the silence. What do we become when the truths we hide finally come to light? Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.